How many of you were here at chapel this morning? Just raise your hand. Oh, okay, so pretty much everybody. How many of you, real talk, were sleepy this morning when I was speaking? Okay, like 3 people. I'm impressed. Wow. I said, these guys are tired, I'm sure. No, man, it's an honor for me to be here with you. And I'm honored that you be able to spend this evening with me. We might witness a minor miracle tonight because I'm at 25% battery. So the good news for you is that means I'm going to go I'm going to get through this quickly to keep my battery on the laptop going. But how many of you are from like the South? The South. Okay. So we can identify because I grew up in the South. In the South, what is one word that you call like an older female or an older male when you're addressing them? Ma'am, sir, right? That's something when I was in college, I was in the Army ROTC, which is the officer training program, and you say sir to the officers. You know, if you said sir to an enlisted officer or an enlisted soldier, which means you don't go through college and then commission as an officer, but you choose to go into the Army and enlist and go that way. If you called that guy sir, they would get offended with you. He's like, no, don't call me sir. I work for a living. Because, you know, the officers in the military get the nicer housing. You know, when the guys are in the bunks on the battlefield, they're in the war rooms. You know, they kind of get the more cushy military life. And so, you know, in military living, there's a high culture of honor that's embedded into the culture of the military. And there's a code, there's standards. We always talked about honor, integrity, personal courage. If you're athletes, I see a lot of athletes and a lot of athletic paraphernalia in here telling me who you do and what you do or what you're about. But on your team, I'm sure there's a culture on the team, right? Any coaches in here? Where's the coaches? Okay, a couple of coaches. And so there's a foundation, there's a way, a code to live out the culture that's going to produce the results that you need to see produced in order to be successful as a team or successful as an individual. Every campus has a culture. And culture, sometimes we use those words interchangeably when we're thinking about like race or ethnicity. And true, you know, certain people groups, when we're talking about race, have certain cultural norms. But if you grow up in southern Louisiana and you are white or you are black in southern Louisiana, and then you're white or you're black, but you grew up in Schenectady, New York, your culture might be completely different, or I'll tell you, it is completely different than the person in southern Louisiana or the person in Schenectady. Those are 2 geographic regions that shape your cultural norms, your language, your slang, your style, the way you dress, the way you walk, the way you talk, the way you view the world, your worldview, the way you process things, the way you vote possibly, the way you don't vote. Whatever it may be, there are all these factors that form and shape who we are at a fundamental level. And so that's why the conversation about honor, about culture, about race is so difficult in America because we're a nation filled with immigrants and we're a nation with a wild variety of cultures. And together that diversity makes up American culture. So in this moment, it's interesting, it's 7 p.m. now, and it was exactly at this time last week, I believe, that the presidential debates took place. Now, I know when I was in college, watching the presidential debates was the last thing I wanted to do, but I'm going to be impressed. How many of you watched the debates last week? Okay, several of you. And how many of you who watched the debates cringed while you were watching it? Yeah, just tell me without getting too political, but what was probably the thing that made you cringe the most? Somebody just tell me. The disrespect. If it was the disrespect, raise your hand if that's what made you cringe the most. That's interesting. Out of all the hands in this room that went up, which that was a lot, that was the thing that everybody came together on, because somewhere in the core of who we are, and I'll even say in the Bible it says that in the hearts of humanity, he has set eternity. In other words, even the atheist, the agnostic who doesn't know who God is or what God's about, at the core, there's something in us, and it's a God-shaped vacuum, so to speak. It's a thumbprint of God, which I talked about a little bit this morning, the image of God within man that sets the foundation of our conscience and makes us, kind of gives us like a ground floor for what is right, what is wrong, what is honorable, what is dishonorable. And whether you serve Jesus or not, whether you've ever cracked open the Bible, that core code is inside of you. And when you see it being violated, there's something inside of you that goes, man, that ain't right. We live in a nation and in an era that's called the postmodern age. And postmodernism essentially says there's no such thing as absolute truth. What's true for you is true for you, and what's true for me is true for me. You do you, I do me, we'll all get along. The problem with you doing you and me doing me is what happens when what you're doing and you're just doing you violates me. And I say, man, that's wrong. But you're going, no, it's not wrong because it's true for me. Like my code of ethics says that if I want to punch you in the face whenever I want to, I can. Because postmodernism says it's okay. There's no absolute right or wrong. And what we see in this fight for so-called freedom in our nation right now, freedom of expression, freedom to do whatever we want, is the further we swing away from the pendulum of biblical truth and the standard that God sets in a world that is seeking to cast off all restraint. We don't want anybody telling us what's right and wrong. We don't want anybody to set the standard. We want to set the standard for our lives. The problem with that is that we both have that core understanding or that core imprint of what is right and wrong from God, but we also have a core nature that is rebellious. And so if we try to define what is honorable, what is good, and what is right by our own definition and live that way, man left to his own devices destroys everything. We're a fire. In fact, in Proverbs, it says the tongue is a fire. Who can contain it? But it also says the person who can control their tongue can rule a nation. This is very interesting to me. Because I think one of the cringiest things about last week's debate is this wasn't like your resident advisor. This wasn't the student body presidents going at it. These are the two guys that will one day control the button that could launch nuclear warheads and wipe out nations. How did we get to this place? What has happened that our best choices don't even know how to come together and reason together? This is why it's so critical that you, in this place, you say, you know what? I'm going to set the standard. We together, not just me, but we're going to move from a me culture to a we culture. Somebody say, not me. Like say it, not me. We. See, when you do you and I do me, we never get to the we. And I didn't coin this phrase. You probably heard it before, but they say if you want to get somewhere fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. Anybody ever heard that together? The thing is, your destiny is inextricably tied to the person next to you. You understand that in a team context, right? There's no individual teams, right? So if this guy is at his best on the team, I need you to be at your best, because if I'm a great quarterback but none of my receivers can catch it, we're not winning any championships, right? I ran track. It was a team sport too, but what I realized is that at first I was really, really good. And I became the best on my high school team. I'm the best. I'm killing everybody. Until I come to that one meet where there's people who are blowing me out of the water, and I'm like, what's happening? I'm the best. And suddenly it took me turning my pride. We're human, we're prideful, but it took me embracing the fact that no matter how hard I'm working, this guy is outrunning me. So I'm going, you know what? I need my teammates to get faster so they can push me and I can push them. They can get better. And so that when we're running, I want all of us to win. Like I want our standard of excellence to go from here, our standard of speed to be from here. I need it to go to here, so that when we're racing the guys that are here, we're pushing them and they're pushing me. And so I began to kind of embrace my own weakness. The road to a culture of honor starts with humility. The doorway into the household of honor begins with humility. And it's recognizing that I cannot do it alone, and that whatever you're strong in, I want to celebrate that, and whatever you're weak in, I want to serve it. Will you serve me into my destiny? That's where biblical unity starts, and that's where biblical humility starts. Jesus is the King of heaven. The King. He has all power, all of it. And he sets his power aside to walk in this weak frame. I mean, this frame is so weak. The human frame is so weak that all of us are in this room wearing masks because of something that we can't even see. Hold on, think about that. The whole economy, not just of America, but the nations of the world, in a moment, gets crippled by something we can't see. In all of our strength, in all of our wisdom, in all of our technology, in all of our science, in all of our experience, we realize just how weak we are, how vulnerable we are. So what's this kingdom? What is this culture of honor supposed to be built on if we can't trust our own understanding of what honor is? Thanks for asking. I'm going to tell you. The culture of honor that has to be created here for us to become a more excellent people, a more excellent nation, a more excellent person, a more excellent family, a more excellent representation of excellence on the earth. It starts with Jesus, who in his last prayer, or not in his last prayer, but in the Lord's Prayer, when the disciples said, "Teach me how to pray," he said, "Pray, thy kingdom come on as it is in." How many of you know we're not going to heaven? I know that might shake up some theology here. I don't know. But biblically, if you read, actually nobody is actually going to heaven. Heaven is coming to earth. Did you know that? In the book of Revelation, the whole book of Revelation ends with a city coming down out of the sky and setting on the earth, and an angel gets out a big trumpet, blows it, and goes, "Behold, the dwelling place of God is with men. Heaven on earth." That was always the original design. In the garden, it was Adam and Eve in a garden with God on the earth. Then Satan gets in there, liar, messes everything up. And then the whole of the Bible story is God attempting to reconcile man and God back to the place where we can live together on earth in unbroken fellowship. And it's that sin nature that causes the discord and it dishonored God. Sin ultimately is living in a culture of dishonor, dishonoring God with your body, dishonoring God with your thoughts, dishonoring God by saying, you know what, you're not God at all. And so the first place to restoring and living in a kingdom, a culture of honor is saying, I want to restore my fellowship with God. God, what is it in my life, in my thought life, in my habits that prevents you from being honored? In fact, how many of you think about honoring your parents when you're here? You ever get into something? Let's be honest. You get into something or you don't get into something because you're thinking about your parents. I know when I was in college, 7 hours away from home, getting tempted, having certain opportunities, and something on the inside of me, hey man, just come to this party, just do this, do that. And I'm sitting here going, oh snap, what if my parents found out? Anybody ever, let's get real, anybody ever thought like that? I'm like, yeah, I want to go. And I'm hearing my dad's voice, boy, don't you get in that car. So honor starts, first of all, with a healthy fear of the Lord. You're thinking about your family. You're thinking about where you came from. You're thinking about how you were raised. You're thinking about your foundation, the family name. I want to bring honor because I'm not living just for me. I represent something. I represent someone. I represent a lot of people, actually, when you really think about it. I'm going, man, am I making choices right now that honor those who lived through harder times than me and made harder choices? Am I living right now in a way that is honoring those who have gone before me? In Hebrews 11, it talks about a great cloud of witnesses like the spiritual hall of fame. Some of them were beaten and sawed in half and boiled in oil by faith. It says women received their dead children back to life by faith. By faith, they walked through the desert and the wilderness, and they endured hardships. By faith, they did all these different things. Daniel in the mouth of lions, and you know, the David's mighty men. I love the story of David's mighty men. It describes like these crazy men, like the guards of David. And it says one guy, Benaiah, he took the jawbone of a donkey and slayed 3,000 men with the jawbone of a donkey. I'm like, yo, these guys are crazy. But I think of all these great and mighty overcomers, and even the ones who by faith endured so much, that we might live in the culture or the nation or the moment, or even that you might sit in the seats you're sitting in right now. And we have to think about them as we go through our day. What did it take for you to get to this seat? What price was paid for you to get to where you are right now? And that becomes a foundation for how you begin to move in your relationships and in your education and in your commitments. But anyway, I didn't plan on saying all that. Is this helping somebody? Somebody okay? Everybody okay? All right. So one of those who went before us was Dr. Martin Luther King. And he said in his famous I Have a Dream speech, I have a dream that one day the sons of both the oppressed and the oppressors would eat and fellowship together at the same table. He calls this table the table of brotherhood. Now that's not leaving the sisters out. but he called it the table of brotherhood. And this is a phrase which denotes that persons that have come from the same family line share the same father. Now, this is interesting that he talks about a table because Jesus in Matthew 22 says the kingdom of heaven is like a wedding feast. What is the kingdom of heaven like, this kingdom that's coming on the earth? He says, well, it's like a wedding feast. And he says it can be compared to a king who gives a wedding feast for his son. And he sent out his slaves to call those that had been invited to the feast, but they were unwilling to come. And again, he sent out other slaves saying, tell those who have been invited, behold, I have prepared a dinner, everything's ready, come to the wedding feast. But those people who were invited paid no attention, and they went their own way, one to his own farm, another to his business, and the rest seized his slaves, mistreated them, and killed them. Imagine if you guys were invited tonight by the president of this college to this conversation right now, and you just ignored the invitation. Do you think the president would be happy with you? Would he be happy? What if you took it a step further and said, whoever invited me to this thing, I'm going to kill him? You really don't want to go that bad? Man, hold on. That's what happened. The king of the nation invites you to a feast, and it's like, man, I ain't got time for you. I'm on Instagram right now. So the king's angry. But then the next group comes out, he sends another group, and you're like, I already told you I'm not coming. Pow. Dishonor. So then the king does this. He said to his slaves, so the king was enraged, and he sent his armies and destroyed those murderers and set their city on fire. Whoa. Then he said to his slaves, the wedding's ready, but those who were invited were not. Those who were first invited, they weren't worthy. So the ones who ignored the invitation and the ones who killed the messengers, they weren't worthy. The king killed them because he's just. Jesus is justice. And then he said, go, therefore, to the main highways, and as many as you find there, invite them to the wedding. Invite them to the feast, to the table. And those slaves went out into the streets and gathered together all they found, both good and evil. Listen to me. Say, good and evil. Who is good in your life? Think of who you like to spend time with. Who do you like hanging out with? Who do you consider to be good? Okay. They have a place at the table in your life, because this is what the kingdom of heaven is like. It's like a feast. It's a table. It's a place of gathering. Who eats at tables? Families eat at tables. What else happens at tables? Business takes place at tables. We got beef. Let's cook it at the table and eat it. Because it says, go invite the good person and invite the evil person. In fact, there's a scripture that says, you prepare a table for me in the presence of my enemies. Does God go and say, go get Chick-fil-A and just eat it with people you like? No, he says, go buy your enemies some Chick-fil-A and eat it with them. So how do we deal with conflict? This guy says this, and I heard he's talking about your mama, man. Ooh, did he say my mama? Well, you know, Jill posted on Instagram that la-da-da-da-da, she's talking about you. There's a protocol for how to build a culture of honor, and it starts with you going to your enemy and finding a way to bless them. Don't go and talk to somebody else and try to settle things all around the issue. You go directly and set a table. So he says, invite the good and the evil. And it says the wedding hall was filled with guests, and the king came in and looked over the dinner guests, but he saw a man who was not dressed in wedding clothes, and he said, how did you come in here without wedding clothes? Then the king said to his servants, bind this man hand and foot, throw him into the outer darkness, in that place where there'll be weeping and gnashing of teeth. There's a lot in this parable. I won't break it all down, except that what we see is that Jesus is the king. In fact, there's a guy named Kanye West who came out with an album last year about this time called Jesus King. Check it out if you haven't heard it. He's the king, and he's setting this table for people of every ethnicity and every background, and he's saying the kingdom culture is like a wedding. There's a table, everybody's invited. You have a seat at the table. Your enemies have a seat at the table. And at the table, there's a certain protocol. God has something to say even about where people sit at the table. But the main thing is he settles disputes at the table, and he's the one who renders judgments at the table. You are not able or entitled to your own set of judgment about the other person or about another situation. You have to understand that there is a table that you're supposed to sit at, and that you're supposed to set in a place of conflict, and trust that God at the table will decide. He is the judge, he is the jury, and he's the executioner. That's what we see in this story. And so sometimes we focus so much on trying to get another person to see that they're wrong. This is what we see on social media right now. Is there's a spirit of accusation in the land right now, where it's like, hey, everybody's pointing the finger. That's what we saw in the debates last night. Or last week, it was just a back and forth. It's jab, 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 jab. It's a fight. But no, God says, no. Let me settle the dispute. Can you possess yourself internally? Do you have the character, the self-control to operate in the principles of the kingdom of heaven? And here's the principles. First of all, Song of Solomon says that he has brought me to his banquet hall, and his banner over me is love. Another translation says Jesus brings us to a banqueting table, and over us he says, I love you. Love covers a multitude of problems. In 1 Peter, he says, love each other deeply, because love covers over a multitude of sins, and offer hospitality to one another without grumbling. How many of you have somebody in your life right now, or some issue or some person that you could honestly say, I don't like them, or I have an issue with them that needs to be settled? Just raise your hand. All right. Here's something that you can do to become more like Christ and to begin to enter into a culture of honor. He says, offer hospitality to one another without grumbling. Another scripture says, bless your enemies. Go home tonight and say, what can I do to bless this person? Go serve the person that you most dislike. The things that it brings up inside of you, the test is part of the character of Christ being formed in you, because Jesus stepped out of heaven and served the whole earth, even though they rejected him. Has somebody rejected you? Become like Christ. Serve that person. Somebody talk bad about you? All right, great. Go tell them how great they are. When they talk down on you, they hate on you, you just smile. You know what, man? You are great. Right when you want to punch them. You know what? Here's some money, man. Let me just bless you, bro. You know what I'm saying? I know that sounds crazy, but it's supernatural. What is the table of brotherhood? In Acts 2, we see that they prayed together. They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching. They hung out. They ate together. They literally enjoyed a table where they ate. This is how you can begin to create a culture of honor. Pursuing God together. Reading the word together. Hanging out. Eating together. But in Romans, there's a command to be hospitable, and this is what I was hitting on. It says, bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse. Rejoice with those who rejoice. Mourn with those who are mourning. Are there people among you if you're in a majority culture. There's African Americans and people from other nations in this room. Have you ever thought about the fact that, sometimes things happen. Things are happening right now. You got business to do. You got rehearsals or, theatrical rehearsals or practices to get to, and you're out here on the field trying to do your job, but this guy right here is distracted because another African American just got shot. And he cares about football, he cares about basketball, she cares about volleyball, she cares about theater or chorus or whatever it is you're doing. But at the end of the day, we all have baggage. We all are living and navigating through this human experience. And sometimes we just got to stop. You got to pay attention to create a culture of honor. Get out of just it all being about you and begin to look at other people. Hey man, how you doing today? Man? Is everything okay? Sometimes you just need to lament together. You just need to weep together. Sometimes you don't need advice. You just need somebody to sit and cry with you. Do you have somebody in your life that you can cry with? I'm talking to somebody here, not at home, not just getting on the phone with your parent. Do you have friendships and relationships around you right now, young men, where you can cry? Life is hard, man. Life is hard, but God is good, and he sets you into relationships. And it's no coincidence that you're on this campus right now. If you're a young minority, you're like, man, I grew up in Atlanta. I'm here in Hillsboro, Kansas. What in the world? Listen, it's no mistake. God knows exactly what you need, and there's people that you need here. There are resources that you need right here. But it's only going to work if there's a culture of honor, if there's a culture that recognizes the gifts within your community, the gifts within this room, and the differences, the distinctions. So honor says, we don't have to be the same. We don't even have to agree. But we do have to love. I don't even have to like you, but I'm going to love you. I don't have to prefer your culture, but I'm going to prefer you. I don't have to prefer your music, but I'm going to prefer you. An example is, I was telling some of the leaders earlier today. I remember when I was in high school, I grew up in the Black Baptist church, and the sound of the black church in worship is very different than I've never been to a Mennonite Brethren church, but I'm guessing they're a little bit different. But the church I grew up in, my mom was a choir director. I was the drummer. I played drums every Sunday of my life from the time I was 4 years old. And in our church, the pastor's talking like this, and then there's a distinct moment in the sermon where it shifts from talking to like sing preaching. Raise your hands if you know what I'm talking about. And you have pianos and you have an organ. So eventually, by now, I've been talking for a while now, about 30 minutes. By now, if I was in my church, I would be talking to you like this. And God said, we got to honor one another. Let there be. Y'all know what I'm talking about. And while I'm doing that, the musicians, dun, dun. You better bless your enemies. Dun. Take them to Chick-fil-A and buy. I said buy them a sandwich. I'm not talking about the cheapest meal. I'm talking about 2 or 3 combos. You better bless your enemy. Y'all get the point. So that's the church I grew up in. And I'll never forget my friend, a white guy. We was both 14. He said, hey, man, why don't you come to my church, to our youth group? I was like, man, my mama's the choir director. My daddy's a deacon. My uncle's a deacon. My other uncle's a preacher. My auntie is a preacher. Man, I'm in church every day of my life. I don't want to go to church with you on a Friday night. And is that okay if I'm being real, y'all? And he invites me to his youth group on a Friday night. And this is in the 90s. So like hip hop wasn't a thing. And the cool thing was like alternative rock, like Nirvana and Green Day and like, here we are now, entertainer, you know. And so like the cutting edge youth groups were like these like rock and roll youth groups, you know, in kind of like the white church community. But I didn't know anything about that. So here I am, and I go to this guy's youth group, and the youth pastors run out in Batman and Robin costumes. I'm like, what in the cult is this? They run out, hi guys, oh! And they've got like Nerf guns, and they're like, da-na-na-na-na-na-na. And it's like strobe lights. And in my church, you got a pew, you got a communion table. Don't touch that communion table. You wear suits and ties, like that's it. And all of a sudden he comes out, and then they had the nerve to pull the stuff off on stage. And then they had on shorts and sandals. I'm like, I'm so offended culturally. Like, this is the house of the Lord. You don't wear sandals and shorts on the pulpit. You give God your best. So all of my stuff is like going off. Then they grab the acoustic guitar, or not the acoustic, the electric guitars, and lights go down. I'm like, is this a rock and roll concert? Kids are like head banging. I'm like, man, God is not up in this place. But then they give the message, and I'm all kinds of offended. Like, I can't wait for this thing to be over. At that time, we didn't have cell phones. I'm aging myself. We had pagers. Everybody had a pager. So I'm like checking the pager. I'm like, man, I hope my mom and them page me and get me up out of this cult. And then I hear what they're preaching, and I never heard somebody describe the love of Jesus the way they did. And man, next thing you know, I'm seeing like kids running down to the altar. They're weeping, they're crying, and all this stuff. I'm like, man, this is so weird. But then I'm sitting here starting to cry. I'm like, no, God, you can't touch me in this place. God began to move on my heart. Next thing you know, I was back the next week. And the next week, and the next week. And I'm like, suddenly my hunger for God transcended my cultural tradition, transcended my cultural preference. And I began to develop the ability to see through the things that offend me initially, or maybe offend my cultural paradigm. Not things that offend Christ, but things that offend like my normal set, you know what I'm saying? My normal wirings, to begin to try to find the gold in everyone and everything. You want to live in a culture of honor? You got to be willing to be offended, and even be willing to be uncomfortable. In fact, you want to go the extra mile? Find a way to get yourself in an uncomfortable situation. If you're living in a comfortable space, you never feel like your ideas are being challenged, go find somebody to challenge your ideas. Because that's the way you're going to grow, and that's the way you're going to begin to see the beauty of God. If I only hung with people that look like me, worship like me, think like me, talk like me, walk like me, I would not know who God is, because God has put a unique expression in every people, in every tradition. I can't wait now. I want to come back and visit a Mennonite Brethren church. I've never been to one. Like, man, what's God sound like, feel like, look like among the Mennonites? I don't know, but I want to learn. That's how you grow, and how you begin to embrace the beauty and the breadth of the kingdom of God. So here's some really, really, really practical things. Jesus washed at the table He washed the feet of the disciples. This is what I'm talking about serving. Whose feet can you wash? Y'all don't understand. I don't like feet. I never have. Like, feet are nasty to me. They always have been. I'm like one of those weirdos. But I married a ballerina. She's gorgeous. She's the most gorgeous woman in the world, just in case you're watching. But she's a ballerina, and so even when she stands in this like ballet posture. And I'm like, wow, this is amazing. Then she takes off her shoes, and I see ballerina feet. Anybody ever seen a ballerina's feet? Woo! It's rough, because they're like standing on their point. You know, it's like. So I said, this is irony. This is funny because now, you know, I have to deal with ugly feet, but a beautiful woman. But think about in the days of Jesus, they didn't have hiking boots. Anybody ever been to Israel? I was in Israel in 2016. Man, it's crazy. When you talk about Jesus climbing a mountain, these guys literally climbed a mountain, you know, not with modern shoes or footwear or rappelling gear. I mean, these brothers, it was the real deal. And so when you read about the disciples washing each other's feet, and they only had sandals or no shoes at all, I can't even imagine how rough, how dirty their feet were. When you read about Mary pouring out her oil and washing the feet of Jesus with her hair. They didn't have showers. Do you know how bad their feet must have stunk? A culture of honor says, I'm willing to go to the low place. I'm willing to get into the dirty with you. And I'm not going to stand afar off. I might even use my hair. I'm going to put my head where it costs me something. I'm going to smell your dirt. I'm going to smell your stank. I know that sounds crazy. But that's what the disciples did. I'm not going to see your dirtiness. I'm not going to see your blind spot and separate myself from you. I'm going to see your blind spot, and I'm going to get in it with you until we can both see more clearly. Do you hear me? And to do that, we have to use righteous judgment. We have to listen. Everybody say listen. Listening shows we care, we're willing to learn, we're willing to learn, and that we are trustworthy. Just sit down with somebody you don't understand. Maybe there's a topic you don't understand. Maybe you don't understand the racial conflict in America right now. Find somebody who you think is passionate about it and sit down and say, hey, talk to me. I just don't understand. If you're a person of color in this room, you've heard offensive things said, you feel like people are indifferent, and the only person you can talk to about it is people who look like you. That's a dangerous thing. Because at the end of the day, you're here, and this is a part of your community too. So what do? Go step out. If you're frustrated with, let's face it, let's use the word. If you're frustrated with white folks around you right now, don't just talk to the black folks about how frustrated with white folks you are. Find a white person and go, you know what, man, I'm frustrated with y'all right now. Can we talk? Have some hard conversations. Get offended if you must, but don't stay in your offense. Say, you know what, we're coming to the table, and I'm going to stay at the table with you. I'm not canceling you. There's no cancel culture in the kingdom. They rejected Jesus. Did he reject us? He says, no, he was long-suffering. He was faithful. He's committed. Emmanuel, God with us. I will never leave you. Even when I gave God the middle finger in my own life, rebelling against him, rebelling against my family. Where would I be if God left me? In my mess, in my confusion, in my misunderstanding. The culture of honor says, I'm staying. The culture of honor says, we're in covenant together. I am because we are. We cannot, there's no me. It has to be we. And the table is a place of mercy. To the merciful, I will show mercy. So here's some principles as I close. There's so much more to this, but we have to set the table of brotherhood and build it in our lives. Everybody say, build the table. We have to build the table together. It takes all of us. And the principles are being kind. The fruits of the Spirit, love, joy, peace, gentleness, kindness, self-control, patience, long-suffering. We got to have the fruits of the Spirit in our lives. So we have to be kind. Everybody say, be kind. Be truthful. Don't blame. Own it. Be trustworthy. Trust. Listen. Learn. And don't leave offended. If you have a conversation with somebody or you're living, you guys live in community together, we have to guard our hearts from being easily offended. When we learn how not to be offended, like I try hard to be unoffendable. And because of that, people can't have power over me. Because I know who I am and I know whose I am in God. It's only at the end of the day, it's what God says about me that matters. So to build the table, we have to be intentional. We have to be committed. And we have to be humble. If you will commit to build the table of brotherhood and to follow the model that Jesus set for us, you'll have power to overcome this world, and power and authority. You'll gain authority to lead in the culture right now. God knows America is looking for leadership. When I look at you guys, I see hope. I mean, this city, this campus is like a city within a city. Every college campus is. So if you can learn to build a culture of honor in this little space, this little campus, and take this campus for the kingdom of God and say, in this place, in this part of the whole world might be in civil war. The rest of the nation may be in civil war, but in this city, meaning the city of Tabor College, we love each other and we have a culture of honor. You'll be a model in a city on the hill that can't be snuffed out. Thank you guys tonight for your time.